particular, I was very interested in what you had to say regarding college and career education, the alternative paths for those who may not be taking a traditional four-year route. But I wanted to go back just a minute to the international theme of our event here today. You've traveled pretty extensively as chief executive, as governor, and especially in the past year to a number of countries, some of them high-performing, many of them with interesting innovations and test beds that you can see in place. What kind of lessons have you seen in your travels to China, to India, to Singapore, to South Korea, that you think would offer interesting lessons for the U.S.? What can you bring back home here, and what do you see building on here in the state of Maryland?
I guess one of the most eye-opening things to me in traveling this year, I did not do a whole lot of traveling in my first 4 years. As Americans, we don't like it when our elected officials travel, but it is important. You learn by traveling. We traveled to India, also to China, Korea, Vietnam, also Qatar. I guess the thing that struck me more than anything else was just what a tremendous amount of consensus these fast developing, emerging world power countries have around the primary importance of education investments. They can't do enough quickly enough, and they're all, they're all trying to learn from us in many ways. I mean, we had academics, leaders there from our colleges in India, and the national leaders that we spoke with were very, very hot on recruiting a presence from all of those universities in their country. Many were the offers of, I have somebody that might want to talk to you about giving you land, about building the building for you for free, if you will operate it and then you will do your program there. And then you come home to our country and we've almost forgotten what's made us strong as a people. And, I suppose we've had an easier time than some in forging that consensus in Maryland, but what struck me most was just how strategically, what a sharp strategic perception they have about the importance of educational investment.
Are there specific business and community initiatives that Maryland has, partnerships it's built with partners elsewhere that government you might touch on?
Around the globe or here in Maryland?
Well, around the globe, I'm thinking in terms of the international.
Yeah, on the international front, I mean, so what you realize when you do one of these trade missions as governor is just how interconnected your state already is with the global economy. We had not intended to send the largest trade delegation in the history of the world from my state to India. But that's the way it worked out, because when we sent up the flare and said, look, we're going, we had so many people that already were doing business in India and already employing people here in Maryland based on the business that they do in India, that we quickly signed up a delegation of about 100 people. So those partnerships are ongoing. Some are just developing. One of them has to do with the University of Maryland. We take for granted in our country food security. Every now and again, we'll have a food scare or some story about cantaloupe or other things, and we'll think about it. But it's a huge issue in India. How do you provide food security, supply chain, food production, and the like? And so some of the expertise that we take for granted here at University of Maryland and USDA, we look forward to partnering with India to develop and also to develop businesses over there. Some of the life science biotech thing, I'll tell you one of the cool, maybe you're thinking more education, I'm thinking more broadly, but we have a company that figured out a way to make DHEA, sort of the fatty proteins that are very important for human nutrition, particularly for expectant moms. A lot of times you can get those from fish oils, but there's a way to develop them from plants, from algae. And Steve Dubin, who headed our Economic Development Commission in Maryland, has a company that he recently sold to a Dutch company. The company's based in Colombia, 250 people working in life sciences and biotech, and they signed a huge deal while we were over there with an Indian company in a country where people are avowed vegetarians in many respects for reasons of culture and tradition and faith, and that's a huge market. A small deal over there is a huge deal back here. So those are some of the partnerships that will unfold. On the education front, you know, there's some things that I'm sure we'll be made more aware of as time goes on and these things flower and come to fruition.
I have one last question before we open it up to the audience here, and that's on the subject of testing. You touched a little bit about the statistics, and obviously we're a lot of numbers going through here today, but there's a very lively debate going on nationally about the question of how do you make best use of numbers, whether the numbers drive you, whether you draw value from the numbers. Where do you come down on the right balance of high-stakes testing? We have a commentary in our report from the former Minister of Education in South Korea saying that there's a bit of a backlash in some Asian nations over the impact of high-stakes testing, that you have to find the right balance. Where do you come down on that?
Where do I come down on balance?
Yeah.
I come down.
Where do you draw the line?
Where do I draw the line? I noticed in some of the rankings that you had some of the other states scored higher than we did on the standards and the assessments and their manner of assessments, that they asked that they had more questions in their assessments. We dealt with this a little bit in setting minimum standards for high school graduation. How do we come up with the right way to assess those standards? I think that overall, that you have to have some standardized tests. At the same time, I think that one of the casualties of the standardized tests is that we are not putting enough of an emphasis on critical thinking, conceptual thinking, art, music, those things that allow our kids to see the relationships between the relationships. I know math does that to a degree. I know reading does that to a degree. But increasingly, I mean, we have to find some way. For example, I mean, I just did it now. I talked about STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. We should be moving towards STEAM, science, technology, engineering, art, and math. And I'm not sure we understand best how to test on those conceptual thinking skills. But I think that's the piece that needs to enter into the equation more so than it has. Now there are some governors, some Democratic governors from very high-performing states who feel differently than I do and would like to have far fewer standardized tests and less of that. I think that the move to having some standardized tests in our state and doing it across the board has been a positive thing.
Thank you. I'd like to see if we have any questions from our audience.
Actually, I'm afraid I'm going to have to rain on our parade because I know the governor and our other speakers have very tight schedules. So I know we all have lots of questions, but save them for another time. But I would like to thank Governor O'Malley, Dr. Sadusky, and the College of Maryland for joining us today. And congratulations.
Thank you. Thanks very much for your